All right, welcome to today's market and option recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and nice surprise today for the overall markets. I don't know, well, maybe surprises in the right, not the right way, but we were up very nicely today. SPY up 65 basis points, Qs up 1.1% just about, and small caps again just crushing it up over 1% today. So where we really got the hint last night, and I was kind of giddy watching this last night, was just the overnight markets, and uh, you know, they can't continue to trend and without us participating at all. So, I mean, you look at the Hang Seng, which was up 1.9%. The China was up 1.8%. The Nikkei was also up 70 basis points, but this has been the whole story. Is that which really we really don't hear anybody talking about all other than maybe a quick like 5 seconds is what China's doing, and the Hang Seng just continues to rip and just make new highs. So really, really strong, and I think it's difficult for us to not really participate when this happens. And so I was when I saw that was up that much. Uh, I thought it was a really good sign going in today. And then of course looking at European markets, which were also did pretty good, and going back to last about a week ago, I started to look and how many consecutive days was Europe down just slightly, and they've turned that around this week, and towards the end of last week, nice support found. This is the DAX, but if we look at if we look at the Euro stocks as well, you're going to see the same. So it's just set up for a really nice day, and listen, the call buying has really been just it's been very consistent from day to day. There hasn't really been a big fear out there. Even last week when the VIX went up a lot, I think everyone basically, at least in the Tribeca Trade Group trading rooms, just really kind of stayed the course and just weathered a little bit of the. I don't even know if I would call it a storm last week, but it was a little. I would say it was a little bit frustrating last week. I got frustrated at one point, just the fact that it was like a couple days of just a move down rather than I wanted that to occur in maybe 1 or 2 days, and I think it took 3 days of just a little bit of lackluster price action. But again, what really kind of helped us stay the course was just to watch the tape and notice that there was still just consistent buying going on in options, and I think just staying the course really helped pretty well. So S&P was up again about 50. It says 55 basis points, but SPY was up a little bit more. Pretty tight range. After the first hour, I think for the majority of the session was I will say kind of a little bit boring. I think things kind of traded just sideways for after the first couple hours of the day. Qs were really the story, and I think we called this. So again, here just kind of showing here that we really didn't move much from about 10:30, 11 o'clock on in the major indices. Those kind of stayed put as is, which is fine. For them to kind of hold their gains. But I had talked about this morning. We every morning we look at individual names for setups, and I actually was looking at the FANG stocks for the first time in a while because they just haven't participated lately. And you know that these things will just come back in a rotation. They don't usually take like that many days off. I was actually looking at Apple and Facebook. Those were two names that I had called out pre-market. Now I had called out Apple. I was looking at Apple yesterday as well, and it just didn't do anything, which was fine. But it just seemed like after a nice move, earnings, a nice move up, and then a little bit of a pullback, and then we got going. So I don't know. I forget if I covered this in last night's video. I know I had talked about it yesterday that they were on the radar, but again, just all you have to do is basically just watch the tape. You could put alerts as well when things start to get above. I would say above the short-term moving average, the yellow line, which is the the 5 period moving average on my chart. You could either put an alert, or you could see what we saw today, which was just over and over call buying an Apple in the first like hour of the day. They just kept coming in, and that's not something that we've seen. In a long time for probably what a week or two, I would say, for Apple, where the call buyers just keep coming in. So you can see there was a little bit of everything. There was the weekly kind. There was also December 1st calls. But again, we just really haven't seen calls being swept like this just repetitively in Apple in the first hour. This was at 9:36. This was a nice looking trade. January 175 calls going up for 410. That was a $400,000 trade, and then it was just more of that. Some of them were smaller trades, but still the aggressiveness was there. Here was another one. This one coming at 10:13. December 175 calls, and then so on and so forth. Also, then of course you get the weekly guys coming in. This was also at 9:33. So like I said, it was multiple in the first hour of the day. We also saw some calls in Facebook. Now we saw some calls last week, towards the end of last week in Facebook, and then it kind of went quiet until today. So I could show you those trades as well. But they're basically the same as Apple, but not as many. The quantity wasn't quite as high, but real nice move. I think a lot of people were waiting for that and Facebook to kind of pop and kind of looking at this pattern, saying it's eventually going to come out of this. So that was the first couple of things that we saw this morning, and then it was just a follow through with just a lot of names that we've seen, repetitively. Names like. I mean, Micron has just been ridiculous. It's just like, it's literally every day for Micron where we're seeing call buying. And again, it's up 3.7%. I can't say enough about this name. They every day, maybe there was one day this week, or maybe one day in the last 5 days where we haven't seen like really aggressive call flow in Micron, but they just keep coming in more and more and more and pushing the stock higher and higher. 2000 January calls, January 50 calls again, December 8th, sweep opening. I mean, look at it. December 1st, it's just crazy. January 50 calls. These are all decent sized trades. Look at this one. This one's $885,000, January 46 calls. It's really remarkable that this happens on a day-to-day basis. This is another one, 700,000. So these are not like your weekly call buyers. They're like big chunky buyers, and they're not even going after the same strike or the same expiration. They're picking and choosing and going into different places. So it's just been nothing short of impressive and fantastic in that name. Another name that they went after right in the beginning of the day was HIMX. This looks like a pretty clean breakout in HIMX for like the last year. I mean, look at this candle, up 11% in HIMX, and I think this thing is headed towards this purple line, Virgin Point of Control, VPOC at 1472. I would keep an eye on that. A few other names that we saw call buying in: Trip. We saw Trip several times today, starting at around 10 o'clock today. So this name's in a I did not participate in this name. By the time I kind of was thinking about it, it had already moved up here this is basically where the majority of the calls were bought. I know people on Twitter like to say that they bought them here, or people, don't really let you know where they bought them, but they started buying a little bit in here, a little bit after 10 o'clock, and then the majority of them were all in here in Trip. So it did continue to grind higher. So you probably had a little bit of a profitable trade if you followed that trade today. But if you don't believe me, here's the activity in Trip. 1036 was the big block. So 1036. Probably right here is where they bought those. So you're not missing much, right? I mean, it did go up 7.6%, $2, but if you didn't participate in this trade, you probably missed about $1. So you know, there's definitely other names than going after something like that that's in a big downtrend. If you're day trading, fine. I just would not really hold a big position of something that's in that far of a deep downtrend. All right, so other names that they went after. I mean, I could talk for a while on some of these names. Western Digital, this is a name that I've been holding. I shot a video about this about 2 weeks ago, and just really making its way up to my target, which is 94.50. Again, that's a VPOC. I got into this trade. I think it was right in here. So it's been 87. It's now up about $5 since my entry price, and just continuing to rock and roll with this trade. I actually rolled this. I was in December calls, and I rolled this trade out to a January call spread. So I took my profits and rolled them. Other trades, Wells Fargo, keep an eye on this name. They keep coming in on Wells Fargo. It hasn't really done much. It's kind of been grinding higher a little bit, but they keep, it's not huge positions in Wells Fargo trades that are hitting the tape, but they've been pretty consistent the last couple weeks with buying Wells Fargo calls. So you could see like 1,000 here, 1,000 there, 1,000 there. Did a lot of December 29th. I don't know what centered, and I mentioned this in last night's video. Also, a little bit of December 55 calls as well that have gone up. So that was again, I had to shrink the Square again, another repeater. I mean, it's just crazy with Square. It just keeps going up. You don't get much of a pullback of anything. It's now looking like a hockey stick, I would say. The RSI is a 91 right now, but up another 6.3%. This has been a great performer over the last couple of years, but since they mentioned accepting Bitcoin, it's been that hockey stick type pattern, just absolutely through the roof. So they keep buying those, and a couple other small biotech names: QURE, OSUR. OSUR went up, ripped right away on some calls that went up. EWT, which is the Taiwan ETF, also saw a little bit of call buying. Taiwan Semi is a big component in that ETF. What else? We saw a little bit more Corvo. Corvo is one of those names where we see a little bit of call buying when they talk about the iPhone. So we saw some calls yesterday in that name. Saw some action in that name as well. What did I do? I mean, I had a huge trade. Or excuse me, I had a huge day today. I took off my Brazil trade, $2 in just last week at $1.36. STX was a trade I put on yesterday. I let the trade in and it kind of fizzled at the end of the day. I took a really small position in CSX. I didn't even send that out as a swing trade. I took a little bit of BlackRock off that we saw the other day. Splunk, here's a wallop of a winner. In this trade I think a little bit over a month ago at 176, out at $6. Monster, I mentioned Western Digital. Huntsman, another trade that I've been on Twitter talking about as they went after a lot of calls about a week ago in that name. And then KWeb, the Chinese Internet ETF, another huge winner. I own that in cash and in stock. As the Hang Seng continues to rip, so do all the Chinese Internet names. So up again. This has been one of the best trends, I would say. I would say three of the best trends this year have been the home builders, which have just been absolutely on fire. Look at this move from the beginning of year. This was at $32, now at 41. And I would say the Chinese Internet ETF, which is also up around like 75%, I think, this year. And then the robotic stocks. You could look at bots or you could look at robo, but almost every day these things are up. Any bot, any excuse me, any dip gets bought. So, I'm not sure I would say any caution. There's a high number of tickets today, so I think maybe a little bit getting on the exuberant side at this point after the last week and everything hitting 52 weeks highs. Last thing I'll just kind of talk about, which was IWM, which was a great signal. Look at how quickly this went from, oh my God, it's breaking down, to a 52-week high. Just about a week, 145 to 151. Very, very fast, but outperforming just about every day has been the small cap since mid last week. And a really nice signal that kind of pulled us out of a little bit of volatility last week. That's tonight's video. Have a great evening, and I'll see you back tomorrow, the day before Thanksgiving. Have a great night.